Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Leading Edge Podcast, episode number 38. This, of course, is your good friend Eric. I appreciate you tuning in once again. So, guys, you need to know I'm recording this right after Thanksgiving, and the family and I are fresh off an amazing trip to New York City. We went to New York City for Thanksgiving, and the thing is, because Julie grew up in upstate New York, she grew up just outside of Syracuse, that has been a dream of hers to take our kids to New York City for a long, long time. And we did all the things. We went to the parade, we went to the Rockettes, we skated in Rockefeller Center, like all the stereotypical bucket list kind of things we did. And it was literally on our bucket list. And another podcast, I told you about my 50 by 50 list. And taking the girls to the Rockettes was something on my 50 by 50 list because that was so important to Julie. That was so important, such a big deal to her, and it was super special. So I would encourage you, get that on your list. I had people tell me ahead of time who had been there for Thanksgiving. They'd been in New York City around Thanksgiving time. What they told me is that New York is so special during that time of year, and you know what? They are right. It is super special. It's really amazing. So get that on your list. In this episode, we are going to talk about being a player versus being a victim, all right? So this is called Players versus Victims. And the first thing I want to do is I want to clear up the definition, okay? Because I think those two words can be construed in lots of different ways. If we looked them up in the dictionary, it's one of those things where you'd have, 3 or 4 or 5 different definitions of the same word, all kind of related, but can mean a lot of different things. So let's get clear about what I mean when I talk about being a player or being a victim. First of all, how about victim? So, people can be, victims of crimes or victims of really bad things that happen to them. I don't mean that, okay? So we're not talking about that kind of victim, and of course, we don't want that for anyone, of course. And there are times where really bad things can happen to people. They can be the victim of something. That's not what we're talking about here. We're going to talk about a different meaning of being a victim. And then when it comes to player, what I don't mean is being a playa, right? So Julie and I laugh a lot. Sometimes, we'll see some pop star, someone who's famous, and they're run around with a bunch of different women, and we'll kind of joke and say, playa on playa. So someone can be a playa, and that's not what I mean. Okay, so I mean when I say player, I mean in a very positive sense. All right. So for example, when I think about someone who's a player in the very positive sense that we're going to talk about today, person that comes to mind is Peyton Manning. So obviously he was a great football player, but also he was an incredible human being, right? He was just a great stand-up guy, did a lot of great things for the community. He was a great leader. I also think about someone like Russell Wilson, the current quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. Not only is he a great football player, but he's also just a great guy, right? He is a player in the very positive sense of that word, all right? So to kind of give you some people specifically to think about, when I say player, it's someone like a Peyton Manning or a Russell Wilson. So really this is about a mindset. It's about how you view the world. It's about how you interact with the world. I first learned about this from Larry Kendall, this thing about being a player or a victim. And when he taught about it, he taught it in the sense of energy. So he said that someone who has high positive energy is a player. Someone who has low negative energy is a victim. All right. So high positive is a player, low negative is a victim. And what you need to know is that while players are confident, this is about more than just being confident. All right. So if you are thinking about this word player, even if you're thinking about a Peyton Manning or Russell Wilson, you maybe think about someone who's just super confident, someone who really kind of struts their stuff. Well, I'm not necessarily only talking about that. This is about more than confidence. I'm talking about much more than someone who can be confident and strut their stuff. So I'm not talking about people who kind of put on a show, almost like think about in the animal kingdom, like a peacock, someone who fans out their feathers and puts on a show for everyone and has this great air and aura about them that's sometimes like put on, right? It's not authentic. That's not what I mean. So this is about way more than confidence. It's about perspective. It's about how you interact with the world. It's really about how you do life. And the thing is, what we're going to come to find as we go through this here, the thing is that the universe really rewards players. All right. So when you can step up and when you can be a player versus being a victim, the universe will reward you. Okay. You will get payback for that. You will be encouraged to be even more of that. And so the universe really doesn't like victims. All right. So the universe doesn't take kindly to victims. It's not a really healthy way to show up in the world, and it's not an authentic way, and the universe will really hold victims back, sometimes punish them. It's no way to get ahead by being a victim. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at what does it look like to be a player, first of all. Then what does it mean to be a player, and then what happens when you are. So again, what does it look like? So if we're looking for like examples, if we're looking for how does this show up in the world, if we're looking for people who are players, what does that really look like? And then we'll look at what does it mean for ourselves? What does it mean for ourselves to be a player? And then what happens when you can step up and be a player, all right? Not a player, but a player, right? So first of all, let's start with what does it look like, all right? So you can probably start to think about people who you know, people in your life who are players. And you're thinking about, all right, how do they act? How do they interact with the world? How do they show up? Well, the one way they show up is that players move towards, victims move away. All right, players move towards, victims move away. And what I'm really talking about here is when the going gets tough, right? So when the going gets tough, and boy, the going gets tough sometimes for all of us. It's just the way life works. Challenges show up. And so when the going gets tough, a player will move toward that. They will step right into that. They won't waver, right? They'll be grounded. They're okay with the discomfort, where the victim, boy, what they do when the going gets tough, they will run, right? They'll run, they'll hide, they'll duck. They get away from confrontation. They get away from challenge and difficulty. They really shut down, and so they run away. Another thing that players do is they fly above the drama, okay? Drama also shows up, and what players do, they just fly above it. They don't get themselves entrenched in that. They don't get hooked into it. So that's what victims do. Victims get hooked. And victims, metaphorically, you know what they are? They are like loops on a Velcro. So if you think about Velcro, how Velcro actually works, it's a hook and a loop. All right, that's simply how it works. So it's a bunch of tiny little hooks on one side, and then over on the other side, it's a bunch of tiny little loops. And what victims are, they are loops, right? So they're just there to get hooked by something. So when the hooks come along, and they just do, right? The world puts out some hooks sometimes, because a victim is sitting there as a loop. They're like looking for the hook to latch onto. They'll latch their loop onto that hook, and there they go, right? All at once, they're hooked by that. They're hooked by that drama, and they're sucked in. Where the player, they don't have that loop, right? So there's nothing for the hook to snag onto. There's nothing for the hook to catch onto. So players fly above, and victims get hooked. Another thing that happens with players when things could be better, they are really constructive in giving feedback, all right? So they're not afraid to give feedback, and they do it in a super powerful and very constructive way, where you know what victims do? They complain, all right? Victims complain, it's whiny, it's, woe is me, it's, why can't things be better? They never have solutions, right? They're really good at pointing out problems. They never have solutions, and oftentimes they won't complain to the source, right? They'll complain to, other people in the environment, other people in the family, other people in the office. They'll complain, but they won't go take it on. So what a player does, they'll go right to the source, and they'll have great constructive feedback. I just the other day had a woman in our office who is terrific. I have so much respect for her. She is for sure a player. She came to me with some really, really great, strong, constructive feedback. And it took so much courage for her to come have this conversation with me because she knew it was potentially going to be uncomfortable, right? But she knew it was the right thing to do. she stepped into that, and there she was being a total player. The other thing that you see with players is that they take a whole lot of action. All right, so they will take action in the face even of some uncertainty. They will take action, whereas the victims, they just hang out and they get stuck in doubt and wondering, right? And they're not taking action because the loop that's playing in their mind is yeah, but and what if, all right? So the yeah, buts and the what ifs just totally take over in their brain and lock them up and keep them from moving forward. Where the players, they can develop this confidence and this certainty that things are going to be okay. They can deal with any rough patch and they can blast through the yeah buts and the what ifs, and they can take action and then learn from all that action, right? So those are four ways that it looks like, right? So if you're looking for examples, if you're looking for ways that it shows up in the world, that's how it does. But players move towards, not away. They fly above the drama. They're constructive, not complaining, and they take action instead of get locked up in doubt and wondering. All right, so then second, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a player? All right, so now we really, knowing that, we want to be players, right? Of course we all want to be players. So what does it really mean? Well, I think it really starts with being at cause versus being at effect, all right? See yourself at cause of something, not at the effect of something. So what happens is victims, they really believe that factors outside of them, believe that factors in the external world, they believe that those factors dictate how they're going to live. So they live reactively to whatever is happening outside. So they live reactively to whatever life is throwing at them, right? So life throws us things, and they sit there and they react to that. So being a player, what it's really about, it's about taking ownership. All right, it's about owning the situation, owning the circumstance, and taking that one step further, it's about taking full responsibility for it. So I own it. I am the one totally responsible for this circumstance, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. I'm the one that owns it. I take full responsibility. So here's the cool thing. When you can relieve others of responsibility, that's when you get back your power, right? If you want power, the way to get there is relieve others of the responsibility, because you cannot have power when you're sitting there giving other people, other circumstances, the power and the responsibility for the situation. You can never break through. You can never move ahead until you take ownership of that. So now let's go to what happens. So what happens when you are either acting as a player or a victim? Well, one thing I was thinking about with victims, something that's an outcome, something that happens, is that there's a whole lot of collateral damage, right? When someone's behaving as a victim, there's a whole lot of people that get affected in a really negative way, because they're not taking ownership, because they're shifting responsibility onto others, because they're complaining, because they live in a low negative energy kind of a state. That can be really damaging to other people. It can be damaging to a culture of a company. It can be damaging to a culture of a family, right? So when you can act as a player, it can be a way to repair damage. So players are really healing, right? Players are rebuilders. They can take things that are, kind of in a disheveled, damaged kind of way, and they can repair that damage just through their energy and how they are, and the fact that they take responsibility, they show up, they step into challenge. When the going gets rough, they move towards it. That can be super healthy and very, very repairing, right? Another thing that happens with players, and I know you're going to agree with this one, another thing that happens is that it's super attractive. When someone is a player, it is very, very attractive. People like to be around those kinds of folks. They like to hang out with players. They like to be in the same room with them, in the same company as them, because it lifts them up. They feel even better about themselves. There's something about players that is super attractive. And you know what I think? A big thing about players that's so attractive is they tell the truth. All right, players tell the truth. They're telling the truth about themselves. They're telling the truth about the world, and that alone is super, super attractive. So then the big thing that happens when you act as a player is it can be super liberating. All right, it's incredibly liberating. I mean, I think about me when I'm able to really step in and take responsibility and take ownership, when I can relieve others of responsibility, that is so liberating, because now I know that I'm the one that is in control of getting things to be better, right? I don't have to wait for someone else or something else to have an improvement on my life. I know that I can do that myself. I don't have to wait for anyone else. So it kind of leads to us saying, well, how do we be a player then, right? So we've learned all about this. How do we then be a player? Well, if you want to be a player, I think it's so simple. It just comes down to responsibility, right? So if you can take responsibility, if you can look yourself in the mirror, that's how you take responsibility, when you can really own it. We mentioned in a prior podcast the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, and he talks about one of the attributes of world-class leaders is that they look in mirrors, not out windows. All right, so I think that's a good way to sum this up, and a great metaphor. When you can look yourself in the mirror, take ownership, take responsibility, know that you're the one, instead of looking out the window at the world and, oh, woe is me, and the world's acting on me. When you can look in the mirror, that's how you can be a player. I'll finish with a story. I heard Peyton Manning speak once at an event. So he was a guest speaker at a real estate conference that I attended, and the speaking engagement happened to be right around the time of the NFL draft. And he was being asked about the draft, and what do you think about the draft, and what do you think about the players in the draft? And he said, so here's something funny about the draft. Peyton Manning says, all these players are coming right out of college, and they're, in an instant going to be multi-millionaires. They're going to have all this money. And he says that one of the questions they get asked during the time of the draft, one of the questions they'll get asked by reporters is, hey, what are you going to do with the money? You're now a multi-millionaire. What are you going to do with all this money? And it could be a fun question for reporters to ask. And Peyton Manning said that often leads to really bad answers. All right, so these guys will start talking about things they're going to do with all the money, and then all at once the conversation's focused on the money, right? And the big material things that they're going to buy. So Peyton's point was that it tends to lead to not really great answers. Peyton Manning said, here was my answer when I was asked that question. What are you going to go do with the money? My answer was, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go earn it. So I just love that answer, and that was a great example of Peyton Manning taking ownership, taking responsibility. He knew that because he got this incredible contract, because he knew he was coming out of college, earning pretty much nothing, and now he's going into the pros and making all this money. What he's going to do now, he knows it's on him now to go earn that money. So that's an example of a player. So my encouragement to you, go be a player, right? So look yourself in the mirror when you feel like you could be being a victim. Get out of that victim mindset. The way to do it, the way to immediately shift is take responsibility, take ownership, look yourself in the mirror, and then you can move forward because you're telling yourself the truth about the circumstance. All progress starts with telling the truth. That's how you do it. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast on being a player versus a victim. I want you to go check out The Leading Edge. That's my inner circle. It's my membership program, so that you can get even more content like this, get even more coaching. Go to jointheleadingedge.com. As always, I appreciate you engaging with this podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, enjoy life on the leading edge. Bye.